Bishop versus knight and fixing. We all know that if we've got same coloured bishops, end game, or even middle game for that matter, same colour bishops, you want to be fixing your opponent's pawns on the same colour as the bishops, whilst fixing your own pawns on the opposite colour to the bishops, so that your bishop's got more freedom to roam around and attack your enemy's pawn. It's a similar thing with bishop versus knight. You know, in this particular position, for example, we have a dark squared bishop, which means that white wants to fix black's pawns on dark squares. These two are sort of already fixed on dark squares, whereas black would want to unfix those pawns from dark squares and in an ideal world fix white's pawns on dark squares, and that should maybe limit the mobility of the white bishop and make the knight a stronger piece, although this position's pretty open, so it's going to be quite hard for the knight. Regardless. Anyway, so this position's a game from 1982. Pause the video if you like and decide what you think you're going to do as your strategy, as your first move. It's a bishop versus knight. Obviously, white's doing better because we've got a bishop, pawns on both sides of the board, and we have a passed pawn on b5, which looks pretty strong. This knight's got to deal with that. But by itself, that's actually not enough. And so we've also got the principle of two weaknesses coming in here. This is black's one weakness, this b5 pawn. But we'll need to create a second weakness if we're going to win this game as white. For example, king f2 chucks away the win completely. The original position, just out of interest, is plus 4.2. And any other move than the one you need to play, it's gone. We're now down to plus 0.2. It's just incredible, really, isn't it? G6 is a very strong move because black's pawns were on g6 and h7. And so bishop f8 would have happened as soon as the king got torn away from f7. The king needs to get over to the d5 square, basically. So black's preparing that g6. Excellent move. And if the white king carries on, coming to the queen side, the black king makes it to d5. White's going to make no progress at all there. If instead white pushes the b pawn, the black king can again centralise. Back here, pushing the b pawn. The black king can again centralise. Bishop to f8, but doesn't do much because now we've got h5. White might change tack and come back for the h5 pawn. But the black king's going to sit nicely on d7. Knight comes to c4. Asks the question of the b6 pawn. If it moves, black's going to win it. That's a fairly easy draw. And if white defends it, the knight can come to d2 and attack the f3 pawn, or king to c6 in a minute once it's defended. You've got king c6. You've got even just knight back to c4. Absolutely fine. So king f2 not going to do it. This one strength or black's one weakness is not enough to win the game for white. And the second weakness you need to create is to fix this pawn on a dark square. And it's just going to really tie the black king down. h4. If black tries to stop you, it doesn't really get them anywhere. h5 takes. Just like, well, what was the point of that, really? You know, I've now fixed the g7 pawn on the dark square, and you've also dropped a pawn. So black's best move, and this is what happened in the game, is probably g6, and then that allows this fixing. So we see takes. This is what actually happened in the game. King into f6, b6, knight back to b7, blocking that pawn, and then bishop f8, attacking the h6 pawn. And although the king comes into g5 and we're going to be losing our h5 pawn, black's then losing the e5 pawn, and now f4 is a weakness on a dark square. And this knight's tied down over here. The bishop can very easily come to c7 and defend the b6 pawn if the black king ever makes it back over here. This game ended pretty quickly after this. King g5, king f2, king f5, bishop g7, hit the h pawn, force it to move. If black tries to stop it moving by king g5, you just keep the march with the king over to the queen side, and the h pawn's got to move eventually anyway. So black may as well move it back here. h5, and then we can change tack again and come back. And these 2 pawns, they're just too weak. They're going to fall. Knight c5. This is how the actual game went. Bishop f8, knight back to b7, king h3, king g5, bishop e7, king f5, king h4. And in this position, black resigned. You can see that there's just no way that black can hold on to these 2 pawns. They are going to fall, and then we're going to have a bishop plus 2 pawns against a knight. So in the original position, h4 was the only winning move. Right, next, this is a game from 1978. There's no fixing to be done here. This is a Tony Miles game, by the way, from the year 1978. No fixing to be done, but these pawns are already fixed. In that last example, the black king was just tied down to defending all those pawns that were fixed on those dark squares, like h6, then e5, and then f4. This time the black knight is tied down. You can see if the b6 pawn falls, it's carnage for black. So all these pawns being fixed on dark squares was very bad news for Tony Miles' opponent. And he just needs a bit of space now, really. It's just a bit of sort of widening the beachhead going on. It was enough to just push the g pawn, takes, f takes g4, bit of manoeuvring around, king g3, king g5. If black had tried f5, then we'd see a swap and the king coming into f4. Yeah, I mean, you can see that that's just completely gone. You know, we're threatening this, and if black takes, king takes, I mean, you can see that it's over. So instead, black might try king g5. Black did try king g5 in the game. Tony Miles played king f3. And now king back to h6. If instead e5, trying to sort of block white out, it's another pawn fixed on a dark square. And there's just going to be a series of zugzwangs here. That's the sort of how you win bishop versus knight. It's just one zugzwang after another. So back in that position, the knight had freedom to move temporarily, but not for long. It then gets tied back down to b6. You can see that the white king's coming in there. In fact, the white king's coming to f5, isn't it? Next move. The black king can't move and maintain control of f5 in that position. So realising that, black played king back to h6. Miles brought his king into f4, king g6, e5, and he's in. The bishop for the knight swap doesn't matter anymore because of the outside passed pawn means that the pawn ending's won. King f7, bishop back to c7, just keeping on tying that knight down to the defence of b6. And he just zugzwanged, there's going to be a series of zugzwangs basically. That's just sort of the black knight is just permanently tied down to the defence of b6. This idea of fixing pawns, I mean, it wasn't alien to me before I sort of went through this section of Dvoretsky. And right at the beginning of the section, as I said in one of the previous videos on bishop and pawn versus knight, or the other way around, that, you know, he says that there's not a single theoretical position worth memorising. So it is a sort of just an ideas thing, and this idea of fixing is just one of the ideas. And like I say, it wasn't alien to me. I've always understood it, but maybe now I'm sort of starting to appreciate the imperative of it a bit more. So this is a game of mine from the Nottingham Congress 2024. I didn't have a great tournament overall, but I won this particular game. So I'm white in this game. It came from, just in case anyone cares, it came from a Black Mardima gambit smash 'em up attempt, and my opponent played pretty well and took, did one of the best refutations of the Black Mardima gambit. I got my pawn back, and I've ended up in this position. I've had a pawn up in this position, it looks like, but it is 2 knights versus 2 bishops. I'm currently attacking the bishop and the pawn, so I'm going to get, the bishop pair, or black's going to lose another pawn here. So my opponent decided on what actually is the best engine move. Bishop takes e3. Now, what would you take back with here? You can pause the video and think about it. there's not a lot in it, according to the engine. Apparently I did play the best move. But even if it wasn't the best move according to the engine, I still think it would be the best move for me because it was a plan and it was fixing. I want to swap the rooks. This bishop's horrendous as far as I can tell, and I'm fixing my opponent's pawns on light squares. And I've carved out the f4 outpost for my knight, which just can't be touched. There. My opponent kicked my knight, so I brought it. A better kicking of the knight would have been bishop f7, so the knight's going to find it harder to move there, actually, because of the c4 pawn falling. But anyway, he kicked my knight with c6. I brought it back to f4. Bishop f7 anyway, and temporarily, I mean, I've got to put my pawn on the light square to defend the c4 pawn. My opponent brought his king to f6, and I went for the swap of rooks, because my knight is better than that bishop. In fact, the engine's saying plus 2.6, so I was right to want to swap rooks. And my opponent swapped rooks and played king e5. So like I say, when I played this game, I understood about fixing. I knew what I was doing. But what would you play here? Like, what do you reckon the top engine move is here? I mean, I knew I was winning, but I was a bit lazy. Because it was just like, well, I'll play the moves I need to play in a minute. No. Don't play the moves you need to play in a minute. Play them now. Should have played c5. If you go back, my opponent here should have played c5 to stop me. Black's losing, but they're losing by less if they play c5. So king e5. I should have played... it's plus 4.5 here for white. And I played king d2. It's just gone down to plus 2.5 for white. Should have played c5. Now black should play c5. a5. Not bad. And yeah, I got there. c5. Okay. And this position was an absolute monster. So it's just sort of... You know, I mean, this was a game I had, and it's not up to me what my opponents understand or don't understand. My opponent should have played c5 here, didn't, played king e5. And now I should play c5. I knew I wanted to play c5. I knew about fixing. But I didn't understand how important it was to play it now. Get it done. There's no reason not to play c5 now. But, I mean, centralising the king is not actually a bad thing to do. But why didn't I play c5? Why not? So, hopefully, I understand it better than I did during this game. This game is quite cool though, because if you look at the black king and where it's restricted to, it just can't move. You know, the pawns are controlling this square, so we've got these two squares controlled by pawns, and these squares controlled by my knight. The black king is kind of in prison in the middle of the board. It's just an astonishing demonstration of good knight versus bad bishop, and you know, and I did eventually do the fixing. The game went like this: bishop e6. My opponent tried to get the bishop into the game via a6. I was quite pleased with that move. a4. The engine does say it's the best move. I mean, obviously I want to play b4, but I didn't really want to give my opponent the chance to really make it so closed. Some positions are so closed that the supposed bad bishop, you can't get to it. So that's not going to stay fixed because I'm going to play b4 anyway. So I think that was a good move. Bishop a6. There it is, b4. Bishop f1. I take on a5. Bishop a6. And yeah, now I'm just going to go for a sort of zugzwang basically. At this point I'd already decided I want his bishop off a6. I wanted to get him to move his bishop. And then I'm going to push my a pawn. I kind of want him to do it with my king on c3 though, so my king can come into d4. So I play king d2. He goes king f6, and I guard the g5 square. So look at this position. Those squares the king can't go to because of the pawns, and these squares the king can't go to because of the knight. I'm just sort of controlling so much of the board with a knight that's got such limited range. It's you know, I didn't intend it to be this sort of you know, the perfect illustration of good knight versus bad bishop. I was just sort of doing my best on the day, but it does turn out to sort of be that. Anyway, I go king c3. There's the zugzwang. Bishop f1. This pawn's actually defended, so I could play a6 straight away. But in the end game, do not hurry. So I'm pleased with that move, g3. Do not hurry. I'm happy enough with it. Unnecessary, but do not hurry. Nothing wrong with it. Bishop back to a6, and then I just do the triangulation again. King c2, bishop f1, and then I push the a pawn. He takes the a pawn. I come back to c3, and with my a5 pawn gone, my king's path to b6 is just completely unchallenged. Remember, the black king to get to c7 needs to go... Where does it need to go? It's just... 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's not getting there, is it? Because king a5 hits the bishop. So the white king's coming to b6. It's over, isn't it? And my opponent just resigned there. Right, next. This is a game from 1966 involving Smyslov, who was a world champion. I'll tell you what, what's quite an interesting thing to do here is that guess what evaluation the engine gives to this position. It's white to play. So, I mean, white's clearly doing better. They've got their pawn up and their bishop versus knight and open board. But guess what the evaluation is for this position? And then, guess what the evaluation is once Smyslov played this? Get your two numbers ready. What's that position worth? What's that position worth? You've written it down. Make sure you've written it down so you know you're not cheating yourself. That position is +6. White is the equivalent of a rook and a pawn up. That's how good white's position is. That position is +0.8. Now, different engines will have different evaluations, sure. But the point is that white has almost chucked away the former world champion, possibly even the world champion at the time. My chess history isn't the best, but I know Smyslov was the world champion at one stage. I think a bit earlier than 1966. Played that move, so it's not like any old idiot played that move. It's a perfectly reasonable. It looks sensible, doesn't it? Get your king up through the middle, and chucked away the win completely. A +6 down to a +0.8. And I think, sure enough, actually, this game just ended as a draw. Black played h4, which is a clue as to what white should have played. And it just sort of carried on like this. There's a bit of sort of maintaining the zone going on, isn't there? I think one of the things is if the white king gets to b7 and takes on a7, the black king can just come to c7 and stay there. And then the knight can just deal with everything else. And I think they agreed a draw there. But in fact, to maintain the +6, bizarrely, I'm not quite sure why. King e4 is okay. Presumably, if black plays h4, you can come and get the pawn. So king e4 is okay. Bishop b5 is okay. That's probably just you're delaying the move you need to play anyway, because you're just attacking the knight as a sort of intermezzo. But the the principled move you need to play, which is absolutely crushing, is just h4. Pretty similar to the other positions we've seen. Just fix that pawn in the light square, and black just can't deal with all these threats. Just can't deal with them. I mean, even if we get our king to b7, black's plan of letting us take on a7 and bringing a king to c7 is then no longer a plan, because the bishop can come back to e2. So there'll be a bit of that going on, maybe. Yeah, so h4. It really is just so simple. h4. Okay. This was me at the Nottingham Congress. Oh, what's the position now? Back in 2024. See if I can find the original position. There you go. I knew about fixing. Just didn't play c5 there, I was all right. It was still plus 2.6. Okay. This is Smyslov in 1966. Completely chucked away the win by not fixing straight away. H4. So there you go. I'm making all the same mistakes as former world champions, and I think we can read between the lines there as to what the obvious conclusion is. White to play in this position. What would you do? This is a game from 1968. White's obviously got an advantage because Black's pawns are sort of all over the place in 3-pawn islands, all isolated, and a couple of them doubled and so on. I guess that's not such a big thing, is it, without a rook on the board to sort of start hoovering them up. But even with a knight, it's, you know, they can't defend each other. It's still a weakness. On the other hand, it's an open board, and Black's got a bishop. So where's this? Where's the winning plan? See if you can formulate a winning plan. The person playing white at the time did formulate the winning plan, and without this little manoeuvre, they wouldn't have won. I mean, I'm just looking down the list of moves according to the engine of what should be done, and what the player playing white actually did was what needed to be done to convert this into a win. So yeah, well done if you found knight d5. That attacks the f-pawn, so Black defends it. Knight b6, that attacks the bishop, so Black moves it. Knight c8, White attacks the d-pawn, so Black moves it. I think Black's moves were more or less forced if they wanted to retain a pawn, and fixing this pawn on a light square was all White needed to turn a game that sort of could have gone either way into a completely won position. So this original position is plus 2.1, but only if White plays knight d5, which he did. And by the time we get round to this position, we're on plus 3.5. Okay. Although to be fair, White has to carry on playing the right moves. Knight e7 is the only thing that keeps that advantage. H5. That's another pawn in the white square. What would you play here? If we're learning anything, should have said that. H4. Straight away. Another pawn in the white square. What are you doing? Alright, H4. Although strangely, it's H4. No, H5's not on the list. It was not a good idea. H4. King F8. Knight back to F5. Bishop attacks that. We'll fork the bishop and the pawn. Bishop has to defend it on b3 because I guess bishop e4 we could have played it f3 and won the pawn, I'm guessing. All this guessing, John. Yeah, if I'm right. Good guessing. Maybe I understand this game a little bit. King h2, king e7, knight f5 check. And Black just blunders horrendously. That was the end of the game. Forked the king and the bishop. But it is gone. Tactics come about from positional advantages, don't they? Blunders happen when you're already under the cosh. It's just you have to keep finding the right moves, So, you know, when you hear people say, "Oh, so I was fine and then I blundered," it's like, were you? How fine were you? You know, how many different moves did you have out of it? Worth thinking about. Next time you blunder outrageously, was it just a blunder, or was it just cracking under pressure because you were just under the cosh for so many moves? And by the way, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have been under the cosh. You know, sometimes that's just the way chess works. You know, you're playing an opening or whatever, particular your opponent offers a gambit, and the best move is to take it and just be under the cosh. Sometimes you have to be under the cosh in chess. That's just the way it works. That's my view. Right, this is a variation that could have happened from a game from 1975. It's black to play. This is the last position we're going to go through on this fixing idea. And I'm looking down the list of engine moves. They're all just saying it's pretty much equal, except for one move for black. Pause the video and see if you can work out what that move should be. One reasonably obvious thing you might want to do is just take the pawn. But this is drawn, really. Very, very slight advantage for black. Plus 0.2, the engine reckons. King takes d4, king g3. And if you play knight f6 to defend your g4 pawn, you've lost your b6 pawn. So it's not really winning a pawn to take on d4. You're just exchanging pawns. And obviously, the more pawns that get exchanged, the better off white's going to be trying to get a draw here. So the move you want to play, the move that sort of gets you an advantage, the principle of two weaknesses. You've got a massively good centralised king. You're a pawn up. All right, it's a doubled g-pawn, but you are a pawn up. Your king's well placed, your knight's well placed. This pawn's fixed on a dart square. It's looking good for black. Big space advantage. Just create that last weakness and you'll be all right. b5. And this pawn's had it. It's fixed on a dart square. It's just going to be a weakness now. King to g3, knight back to f6. Oh, by the way, the other thing that the advance of the b pawn does is that we're now threatening to take on d4 because bishop f2 check no longer picks up a pawn on b6 because the pawn on b6 isn't there. White defends the d4, the d4 pawn and the d-thorn. What's a d-thorn? White defends the d4 pawn, bishop c3, g5, and then white could just say, well, yeah, what are you doing? All right, you fixed my a3 pawn in a dart square. Where's your winning plan? I don't see a winning plan here. You know, your knight's tied down to the g4 pawn. If your king comes in, I can just come and collect this one. I'm going to win this or bring my bishop back to e7. The pawns are just going to get swapped. What's your plan? How are you making progress here? Good question, to be honest. You might want to pause the video and think, well, how would I make progress here as black? So first of all, defend the g4 pawn, so your knight's free to move. White just says, I still don't see a plan. Check. All right. Still don't see a plan. Okay. And then check this out. King g6. The plan is to come down this side with the king and escort the g-pawn through. Because if you just did something like knight f4 check, I know, king g6, I say in this position, back in this position, sorry, just went knight f4 check. The king's just coming to g3. And we're sort of going around in circles. So yeah, king g6, bishop b2, knight f4 check, king g3, and then the king into h5. And white hasn't really got anything better than just to keep doing nothing. Like the knight's guarding d5, so you can't push the d pawn. And we just manoeuvre the knight to f5. Notice how this bishop just couldn't move, sort of blocked in by its own pawn. It was always, even though it was an empty square, it was always fixed by the positioning of the black knight. So knight f5 check, king g2, king h4. It's gone. This knight's guarding the advance of the g-pawn, so we can push the g-pawn. If white blocks king g4 with king f3, then the king can come to h3 and then possibly h2. And yeah, this is like -5.5 now. So it's sort of one of those. I've had so many positions like this in sort of online chess where it's got down to this, I'm a pawn up, and it's just sort of dwindled away to nothing. I mean, to be fair, they're all sort of blitz games, so you haven't really got time to think about anything. But I like to think if it was an over-the-board classical, I could find that move, fix that a3 pawn on a dart square, sorry, and it just creates that second weakness that's just enough to win it. Anyway, that's fixing. It's covered in 2 different subsections of Dvoretsky. One's where the bishop's better than the knight, the other one was the knight's better than the bishop. We've seen examples of both. I've showed you one of my games from a tournament from just over a year ago, a year and a half ago now. And like I said, the main reason I put that in is to say, look, I understood fixing. I always did. I played c5 eventually. But why didn't I play it straight away? What was stopping me playing that move? Why didn't I realise how important it was to fix the pawns? Like, why didn't Smyslov realise how important it was? What was wrong with him? Didn't he know how to play chess? What kind of a move is that? from the world champion. I think we'll end it there.